Hello, everyone. Save Crimea or hold Donbas. Russia lost 116 square kilometers of territory in just 1 month. Ladies and gentlemen, the spring campaign was mapped out by the Kremlin as a decisive gamble, a full-scale offensive aimed at closing the final chapter of the prolonged conflict. With the ambition to completely break the opponent's will to resist, Moscow has thrown its most elite forces into this game, from the 5th Combined Arms Army to the main units of the 29th and 36th Armies across a seemingly endless front line. From Bokut to Kutinteka, from Huryepo to Urikip, a massive war machine operated at a breathtaking pace, launching up to nearly 200 coordinated attacks each day. The goal set was nothing less than to crush Ukraine's fortified defensive ring and gain complete control of the Donetsk region before the scorching heat of summer arrived. However, behind the glory of grand military plans on paper, the reality on the battlefield is telling a completely different story. A tragic and harsh story for Russia's ambitions as this campaign ended in a local stalemate. To understand why such a massive war machine suddenly stalled, we have to look deep into the structural cracks that had been quietly forming since November 2025. This stalemate was not a random coincidence, but the result of a series of systemic consequences, beginning with the collapse of the battlefield communication and information systems. In February 2026, the disabling of Starlink terminals in the disputed territory sparked unprecedented chaos across Russia's front lines. The live data streams from drones suddenly went dark, turning frontline units effectively blind. The connection between small squads was completely severed, forcing soldiers to return to using old-fashioned paper maps. The next shock came from the Kremlin's decision to restrict the use of the Telegram app, which was the only backbone connecting horizontal information flow between units, where field officers shared coordinates. Orders and real-time intelligence, the disruption of this communication channel directly pushed Russian attacks into chaos, leaving them directionless amid enemy fire. Nature also did not side with the attackers, as the long, cold winter gave way to a gloomy, drizzly spring, turning the eastern Ukrainian lands into massive muddy traps, also known as the Zasputitsa mud season. Russia's proud armored divisions were quickly bogged down in the mud, reducing their mechanized advantage to nothing. And when steel and machinery became powerless, the burden once again fell on the flesh and blood of the soldiers, amid a manpower crisis that was revealing increasingly grim shades of gray. Russia's contract soldier recruitment rate has dropped sharply by 20% compared to the same period last year. Only 70,000 new recruits were enlisted in the first quarter, compared to the target of 90,000. Despite the continuously increasing contract signing bonuses, reaching a record level of 30,000 to 50,000 USD in some regions. This bonus inflation not only drains the national budget, but also reflects the bitter reality that money is no longer enough to dispel the fear of a brutal war of attrition. As armored vehicles run out, the Russian military is forced to shift to a desperate military doctrine, using light infantry to attack with motorcycles and four-wheel all-terrain vehicles. On the vast battlefield, these fragile mobile vehicles are nothing more than easy targets for Ukraine's relentless FPV drone attacks. You see, all these factors create a self-destructive spiral, where losing communication leads to losing coordination. Losing coordination paralyzes the mobility of armored vehicles. Helpless armored vehicles leave the infantry without protection, and infantry losses only worsen the manpower crisis. Those weaknesses turned into concrete failures right on the battlefield map, especially in the Kostanta-Ivka tactical area. This is a vital area considered the southern gateway leading into the two strategic fortresses, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. If this gateway falls, the northern urban cluster will be quickly trapped by a southern pincer. Defense analyst Linus Popovich once stated that this is an area where Ukraine has built a solid defense system since 2014. The enemy may be willing to slowly take every meter of land here for many years, but the cost in lives and equipment is enormous. In reality, Russian infiltration efforts have been broken by Ukraine's swift counterattacks. Satellite imagery has confirmed that the Ukrainian military has not only held their defensive lines but also pushed back the enemy, reclaiming many important positions in the east and southeast of Taika province, despite previous claims of control from Moscow. A similar scenario is also unfolding along the Zaporizhia direction, specifically around the Ulyanovsk and Ulyanovsk areas. Here, Russia once concentrated a large number of forces on a narrow front only 15 kilometers wide, with the aim of establishing a solid foothold to directly threaten Zaporizhia. However, these offensives have been completely halted. Local counterattacks by Ukraine in the west and south of Ulyanovsk have wiped out Russian penetration groups, clearing the gray areas around Vokhtad, which can be analyzed further from a tactical perspective. Strategic expert Pablo Lakachuk pointed out that the Russian breakthrough spearheads have created a pincer movement that is too narrow and deep, but lack the ability to expand to both flanks. Taking full advantage of this mistake, the Ukrainian army has continuously concentrated firepower on both flanks, trapping Russian units in deadly narrow corridors where they can neither advance nor retreat. Kyiv's success did not come from a massive, showy counteroffensive, but was the result of a highly pragmatic strategy of dispersed defense combined with localized counterattacks. First, Ukraine's unmanned aerial vehicles would conduct reconnaissance to identify the weakest links in Russia's control system. Next, elite commando teams would secretly infiltrate and approach the target, making way for automated combat robots to sweep through and clear the trenches before the infantry moved in to secure control. Russia once captured these gray zones by sending in small infiltration teams, but they never truly gained control of the battlefield. The Ukrainian Army's General Staff, in daily reports, quietly repelled enemy incursions without naming any major counteroffensive operations. When the Institute for the Study of War in the United States compiled all the monthly map data on May 2, a bitter picture emerged. In just 1 month, Russia had lost 116 square kilometers of territory to Ukraine. Military analyst Alexander Kovalenko from the Information Resistance Group gave a strong conclusion that Russia's spring campaign phase had completely failed. The latter half of the month saw no significant results across the front line. Now the Russian army has to spend an entire month just to gain a piece of land that last summer they could have captured in just 1 week. Military campaigns are shaped by both weapons on the ground and the battle for information and perception. The Kremlin has worked to operate a sophisticated media machine to conceal a harsh reality. This slow demise is not because they have reduced the frequency of attacks. On the contrary, they have increased the intensity of their assaults, but the results have been almost zero. To illustrate this destructive deadlock, statistics have revealed a shocking truth just in the 3rd week of April. The Russian army had to sacrifice the lives of 7,480 soldiers to gain just 41 square kilometers of territory. This harsh calculation means that for every 1 square kilometer gain, the price is the complete annihilation of 23 elite battalions. This horrific casualty rate has continued to rise month after month and reach a record high this past April. It's not just human lives being depleted. Russia's stockpiles of Soviet-era equipment are also running out quickly. Meanwhile, new production capacity can't keep up with the rate of losses on the battlefield, leading to a dramatic decline in the quality of armored vehicles being sent to the front lines. The truth is different. As of 2026, Ukraine has regained about 600 square kilometers of territory. This dealt a fatal blow to President Vladimir Putin's ambition to seize the Donbas region. Ukrainian President Zelensky once issued a stern warning that, to fully capture the Donbas region, Russia would have to sacrifice between 300,000 and 1 million soldiers, a price far too costly and unreasonable even for a major power like Moscow. The resilience and counteroffensive advances of Kyiv are not random miracles, but the result of a modern combat model where technological elements complement each other perfectly. Ukraine has deployed automated ground systems, using combat robots to sweep and clear Russian fortifications. In the sky, Ukraine's interceptor drones have neutralized up to 95% of enemy airstrikes. At the same time, precise mid-range strikes have continuously broken supply lines, destroyed ammunition depots, and flattened Russia's forward command centers. This perfect combination has pushed Moscow into a bitter paradox. They are forced to switch to a passive defensive posture right at the coordinates where they once planned a full-scale attack. Former Director General of the Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service, Mr. Mykola Malamuj, stated that Kyiv has successfully built an extremely resilient combat model across all key fronts. These are the most intense and challenging areas, but they are also where Russia's war machine is being crushed and suffering the heaviest losses. This stalemate is creating a chain reaction, profoundly affecting Russia on many levels, from military and political to economic. Politically, the loss of 116 square kilometers of territory has directly shattered the Kremlin's victory narrative. Even though state media tries to distort the truth, the wave of exposure from Russian military bloggers and leaked videos of pleas and complaints from the front lines have laid bare the stark reality to the public, quietly spreading a sense of anxiety within the Russian elite on the chances of winning this war. Economically, the price to pay for capturing every meter of land is not only the blood and sweat of hundreds of soldiers, but also the enormous financial burden for training, equipment, and logistics. The inflation of bonuses for contract soldiers, reaching $30,000 to $50,000 is alarmingly eroding the national budget. This dire situation has indirectly pushed the Crimean Peninsula into a dangerous spiral. When all forces are concentrated on the Donbas front, the Crimean defense line will be weakened. Conversely, sending reinforcements to Crimea will immediately leave the Donbas front exposed. Russia is powerless in this dilemma, lacking resources to defend both fronts simultaneously. As May 2026 begins, experts from the Vietnam Institute for War Studies predict that there will be no major strategic breakthroughs. Fighting will intensify sharply in key areas as the land dries up and the muddy season ends. This is when Russia can partly restore its armored units' mobility, which has traditionally sped up offensive operations. However, the biggest question remains whether they have enough resources to maintain their momentum as recruitment slows down, weapons run low, and the information deadlock remains unresolved. Military analyst Oleksandr Kovarenko has identified the most likely flashpoints. The first focal point is the Uryagbo direction, where Russia aims to defend Uryagbo and push deep to the west from behind fortified lines to create a springboard for a larger campaign targeting Zaporizhia. Next, the Kostyantynivka area represents the most dangerous scenario, as the enemy tries to provoke a brutal urban battle by penetrating deep into industrial zones and southern districts using small group infiltration tactics similar to those used in Kokot. However, Ukraine's drone barriers and automated devices are making the cost of this tactic higher than ever before. Meanwhile, the Pokot and Myzor-Norad directions are expected to remain in a stalemate, as Russia's breakthrough attempts cannot expand and are under heavy pressure from both flanks due to Ukraine's counterattacks. In the Sloviansk urban area, Russia's goal of capturing it before the end of summer seems impossible at the current pace of their advance. The Lyman defensive line has held strong against all enemy attacks this past month. Finally, in Kupiansk, Russia will continue to frantically establish defensive positions in an attempt to legitimize their claim of control from last year. But this is also where Ukraine's combat robot systems are proving most devastatingly effective. Notably, another potential risk is emerging along the national border in the provinces of Sumy, Kharkiv, and Chelyab, where Russia is using the tactic of gradually seizing small border settlements with sabotage teams, taking advantage of Ukraine's inability to maintain a dense presence of troops in every corner of the border region. President Zelensky also noted that unusual movements along the Belarus border have been detected by the monitoring system. Although small-scale provocations are entirely possible, any military adventurism from Belarus at this time would come at a much higher price. Looking at the overall picture this May, military analyst Alexander Valenko predicts an extremely complex reality. Moscow will try to concentrate its efforts to achieve at least a few limited operational or tactical results in order to save face. The undeniable reality is that what they once captured in just a week last summer now takes them an entire month of hard fighting to achieve. These are no longer cunning breakthroughs, but rather a disastrous stagnation of the Russian war machine. From those intense battlefield analyses, a bigger and more vital strategic question arises. Is time running out for President Putin? This is by no means a simple military calculation, but rather a multidimensional problem, tightly interwoven with economic, political, and social factors. From the outside, Russia's wartime economy still appears resilient, with the 2022 defense budget reaching 186 billion USD and global oil prices remaining high. From the outside, the economy remains resilient.
Chi tiêu quốc phòng đã vượt quá 7% tổng sản phẩm quốc nội, tiệm cận với các ngưỡng báo động từ thời kỳ khủng hoảng của Liên Xô cũ. Lạm phát phi mã, lãi suất ngân hàng vượt ngưỡng 20% và cuộc khủng hoảng thiếu hụt lao động lành nghề đã chạm
billion USD, and from the outside, Russia's wartime economy appears resilient as the national defense budget hits 186 billion and global oil prices remain high.
tự sát và cái hạn định dài hạn ấy đang rút ngắn lại sau mỗi tháng trôi qua. Không chỉ
From the perspective of Russia's wartime economy,
giới báo gờ quân sự Nga giờ đây,
the defense budget appears resilient.
chê trên tiền tuyến, sự yếu kém của hệ thống phòng không, tỷ lệ thương vong
Reach the milestone.
lính, cũng như những nỗ lực bưng bít sự thật vụng về của Điện Kremlin. Tiếng thét đầy phẫn nộ của người dân tại thành phố càng toạc xẻ.
USD and prices remain at that level.
Khu gian mỗi sáng, hay những thước phim tố cáo đầy tuyệt vọng do gì từ mặt trận Donetsk. Tất cả tuy chỉ là những
Besides, the budget background at the billion USD milestone and the current price level are not just about passive waiting at all. They are actively accelerating the process of exhaustion.
Nga bằng một loạt đòn đánh hiểm hóc, rồi hỏa lực vào các nhà máy lọc dầu chiến lược, làm tê liệt hạ tầng thông tin liên lạc, liên tục gia tăng chi phí tổn thất nhân mạng trên chiến trường và duy trì một.
On the outside, the Russian economy appears resilient in terms of its budget.
Kovalenko cũng đưa ra những lời cảnh báo vô cùng tỉnh táo chống lại sự lạc quan.
The defense budget has reached the billion-dollar mark, and prices are at a global level. On the outside, Russia's war economy appears resilient, with the defense budget reaching 186 billion.
Phản ứng dây chuyền làm sụp đổ toàn bộ hệ thống phòng thủ của Nga trên một mặt trận rộng lớn.
World,
Chỉ lúc này cần phải giữ được sự chừng mực và lý trí tối đa. Sự cân bằng này là vô cùng quan trọng.
level.
Nếu Ukraine hiện tại vẫn chưa tích lũy
On the surface, Russia's war economy
đang chứng minh hiệu quả đáng kinh ngạc, mà mòn hệ thống dự bị của Nga
appears resilient.
đẩy chi phí của mỗi đợt tấn công lên mức không thể gánh vác và buộc kẻ thù phải căng mình phòng ngự ở những nơi
Reached $186 billion and
vẫn chỉ nằm trên những trang giấy vô hồn, và mỗi ngày trôi qua, những dữ liệu đẫm máu.
level. The country's economy seems resilient.
Hệ thống sụp đổ hay lịch sử sẽ một lần nữa ghi ra
National defense, a fee to YYT.
những ảo vọng đế chế. Trước cuộc khủng hoảng nhân lực ngày càng trầm trọng trên chiến trường, liệu Điện Kremlin sẽ làm gì?
Reached 186.